From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where it is exactly 7 days until we welcome granddaughter Curmudgeon into the world, and then you all can start telling me that I look far too young to be somebody's grandpa. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the Blast Radius. Glad to have you with us tonight, and we need to have a talk about women's suffrage. But before you start shouting me down as a disgusting, knuckle-dragging, misogynist Neanderthal, a hateful, black-hearted male chauvinist who seeks to consign the fairer sex to a permanent condition of pregnant, barefooted kitchen dwelling and sandwich making, which I know some of you will instinctively want to do, please do afford me the kindness of first hearing me out. Because I'm not here to say whether universal adult suffrage is a good thing or a bad thing, although I do happen to believe quite fervently, and not without evidence, that an electorate with fewer low-information morons in it is, generally speaking, a better electorate that tends to elect better leaders. But that is a topic for an entirely different monologue. It is neither here nor there for our present purposes tonight. Here, right now, in the third decade of the 21st century, whether you're a liberal or a conservative or some sort of middling milquetoast fence-sitter, there's only one way we like to imagine the events of the women's suffrage movement of 120 years ago. We like to imagine that all women in the early 20th century desperately wanted the right to vote. We like to imagine that all opponents of women's suffrage were either men who sought to deprive women of their natural democratic rights, or poor benighted housewives who just went along with what their husbands said because they were afraid of being whipped in between birthing babies and making sandwiches, of course. But is history ever as simple as we might like it to be? Are the people in history ever the convenient caricatures we want them to be? People we can shove into little categorical boxes of our own conception so we can avoid having to think deeply about matters of nuance and complexity? Spoiler alert, no, it isn't, and no, they aren't. And you might be asking yourself right off the bat, why do we even need to talk about this? Universal adult suffrage? It's just the way things are supposed to be. To the extent that it was ever not that way, it's only because our ancestors fit into one of those two most convenient of all boxes that feature so prominently in the intellectual open sewer that passes for our present-day political discourse: the oppressors and the oppressed. But it's not that simple, and it was never that simple. Human affairs are not any more complicated today than they were 100 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago. We just like to flatter ourselves into thinking they are. We like to imagine that we are automatically wiser, more well-informed, more erudite than the generations that preceded us, when, regrettably, that's far too often the opposite of the actual truth. And furthermore, we like to imagine that we can back-project our own oh-so-enlightened current-day values and perspectives onto our long-dead forebears, so that we can feel superior to them, so that we can look down our noses at them, so that we can bask in the knowledge that we know so much more than those poor bastards ever did. But here is the reality. Women's suffrage happened in the United Kingdom and the United States barely 100 years ago. And 100 years, in the grand scheme of human history, is barely an eye blink. Women's suffrage, and universal adult suffrage more broadly, is still a very radical, very recent experiment whose effects and ramifications are nowhere close to being fully appreciated, fully settled, and fully understood. It's an inarguable fact that today, in the year 2026, our politics are more gynocentric than they have ever been, and they get more gynocentric with each passing year. Political messaging, all political messaging, irrespective of which party promulgates it, is increasingly carefully calibrated to do one thing: inflame the emotions of female voters. And it makes perfect sense that it should be that way, because female voters are more pliable, more persuadable, and more susceptible to the spurious emotional appeals that now comprise most of the messaging that exists in our current day political ecosphere. And do you know who foresaw all of this? The anti-suffragists who lived 120 years ago. They were not all male chauvinist pigs, and neither were they self-loathing housewives. Many of them, in fact, were among the brightest, most well-educated, most professionally accomplished women that the 20th century, the early part of it, had to offer. And we're going to hear from one of them tonight. Her name was Violet Markham. And on the 28th of February, 1912, at the Royal Albert Hall in London, she delivered an address that was simultaneously a powerful affirmation of feminism and a full-throated denunciation of women's suffrage. And to 21st century ears, that can sound weirdly counterintuitive. But it's not. Not really. And since she can make her own arguments far better than I can, in a moment I am going to read out the entire speech that she gave that day to a crowd of approximately 10,000. But first, I'm going to set the historical and political scene and better acquaint you, the audience, with the speaker and the times in which she was speaking. Violet Markham was born in October of 1872 in Chesterfield, Derbyshire. She was the daughter of Charles Markham, one of the most successful British industrialists of his day, who began as an engineer and then made his fortune as a colliery owner. Her maternal grandfather was none other than Sir Joseph Paxton, the legendary architect who was responsible for the design of the Crystal Palace at the Great Exposition of 1851. In 1901, at the age of 29, still unmarried, Violet Markham received a sizable inheritance from a family friend that brought her total financial independence. She purchased a home in London and then set about becoming a philanthropist and a benefactor for a wide variety of civic causes. Educational reform was one of the things that most animated her energies, and she thus served on the Chesterfield School Board and Education Authority for 35 years, from 1899 to 1934. In 1902, she founded the Chesterfield Settlement, an educational foundation dedicated to lifting working-class communities out of endemic poverty. She also traveled very widely, becoming an expert in particular on South African affairs, and she co-founded the Victoria League in 1901 to promote closer civic and cultural ties among the constituent organs of the British Empire. She never married until she was well into her 40s, so she was far from being the sort of submissive, shrinking, violent Victorian housewife that one might stereotypically expect a female opponent of women's suffrage to be. On the contrary, she was a brilliant, wealthy, independent administrator, an expert on a wide variety of societal issues, and a globally connected public intellectual. Why was she so fiercely opposed to women's suffrage? Well, for the same reason a lot of other women were. And it can be broken down into three broad categories. Number one, the state as a dual engine. Anti-suffragists viewed the nation not as a collection of isolated individuals, but as an organic ecosystem divided into two distinct halves. Physical force, meaning governance, military, and law enforcement, and moral force, meaning culture, education, and the fabric of the society. Because women did not command physical force, which is ultimately the impetus that provides the backing for any government statute or decree, they argued that involving women in the machinery of state coercion was a structural contradiction in itself. Number two, the power of nonpartisanship. Leaders like Ms. Markham believed that women's influence was supreme precisely because it was disinterested. Once a woman assumed membership in a certain party or faction, her moral authority on social issues would be compromised by partisan tribalism. To them, the ballot was a mechanism that would conscript women into the dirty, compromising world of electoral politics, thus stripping them of their independent civic power. And number three, the burden of representation. The concept of the household vote held that the male head of the family voted not just in his own interest, but as a trustee for the entire domestic unit. Anti-suffragists feared that splitting the household into competing political factions would destabilize the family unit, which they viewed, correctly, as the bedrock institution of the society. But that's just about enough background and scene setting, I think. Let's hear from the lady herself, shall we? Given at Royal Albert Hall, London, Wednesday, 28 February, 1912. Begin quote. Lord Cromer, my lords, ladies and gentlemen, I beg to support the resolution which has been moved and seconded in such weighty and such eloquent terms by the Lord Chancellor and by Lord Curzon. 4 years ago, in a small hall in Kensington, it was my privilege to speak at the first anti-suffrage meeting held in London. We were a small band in those days, but we stuck to our job. Public opinion in the interval has mounted like a great wave. Tonight, this great hall is all too small to hold the men and women who have come to protest against a policy which they hold to be disastrous to the empire, disastrous to the nation, last but not least, disastrous to the cause of womanhood, which it sets out and professes to serve. I leave to the great statesman here tonight the task of dealing with the more directly political issues of the situation. As a woman, I address myself to the woman's side of the question. And first of all, what are we here tonight to affirm? Because it is on the affirmative, not the negative side of our work, that I take my stand. In the first place, we are here to affirm that a woman's citizenship is as great and as real as that of any man, that her service is as vitally necessary to the state. But unlike our suffragist friends, we do not fly in the face of hard facts and natural law. We believe that men and women are different, not similar beings, with talents that are complementary, not identical, and that therefore they ought to have different shares in the management of the state that they severally compose. We do not deprecate by one jot or tittle woman's work and mission. We are concerned to find proper channels of expression for that work. We seek a fruitful diversity of political functions, not a stultifying uniformity. I do not waste your time or mine in combating the statement that we anti-suffragists regard our sex as inferior beings. I treat that suggestion, and you will treat it too, with the contempt it deserves. We on our side do not challenge the sincerity and good faith of many admirable and distinguished women in the suffragist ranks, but in return, we demand from them the recognition, no less frank, that our faith and zeal for womanhood is as great as theirs. And secondly, we stand here tonight for the principle that you can only judge great national issues by the standard, not of what is good for this or that section or class, but by what promotes the highest interest of the nation as a whole. We are told that women want votes and therefore they must have them. In the first place, the majority of women do not want votes, but even so, it is not a question of what women want or what men want for that matter. It is a question of what is best for the state. We do not think it will increase the efficiency of the state to put the balance of political power in this country into the hands of women. Obviously, if you're going to enfranchise women at all, adult suffrage is the only way out of the injustices and anomalies of any limited bill. I agree with every word of that fine tribute paid recently in this hall by Mr. Ramsay MacDonald to the working woman. That is, the woman a large section of the suffragists are practically prepared in large measure to disfranchise under the conciliation bill, so-called. But obviously, you must not take the picked women of every class and then hold up your hands in surprise that they prove more capable than the gardener or the coachman. You must compare like with like. Franchise questions are questions of averages. Until you repeal nature's Salic law, the average political experience of the average woman is bound to be less than that of the average man. Man is and man will continue to remain the business spirit of the world and the work of imperial parliament. Work such as defense, commerce, finance, tropical administration is, in the main, work of a nature which lies outside women's practical experience and with which man is best fitted to deal. On these grounds, we reject this policy. We say it will not promote true liberty or true democracy. You must discriminate carefully between real and nominal extensions of those great principles. We say even granting it might bring some advantages to women, those advantages would cancel out obvious disadvantages to the nation as a whole. Further, what is bad for the nation can never in the long run be good for women themselves. For what is not good for the beehive can never be good for the bee. Thirdly, while women are seeking to control branches of public life for which they are not particularly fitted to deal, they overlook and neglect other important public duties for which, on the contrary, they have special aptitudes. Suffragists claim that once they have the vote, they will reform and moralize England. But I want to know, if they are honest in these professions, why they do not make a better use of the rights and votes they already possess. If the work of imperial parliament belongs more naturally to men, the work of local government, with its splendid opportunities for civic betterment and the uplifting of the race, belongs more naturally to women. Here the powers of citizenship and service can find their fullest and noblest expression. And while suffragists tramp streets and smash windows, what do we find? The great field of equal rights and opportunities with men is practically neglected. Think of it, in the length and breadth of the United Kingdom, there are only 21 women elected on town councils, only 3 on county councils, and you have no less than 32 boards of guardians without a woman member on them. Those figures are the most ironical commentary, as they are the most crushing condemnation of the whole suffrage agitation. They expose its essential hollowness in a dramatic manner. The suffragists are always prattling about social reform, but I want to know why, as ratepayers, they tolerate slums and insanitary dwellings, infant mortality, indifferent education, and child labor, ever one of the gravest blots on the escutcheon of a great nation. All manner with which a municipality can deal if it chooses, all matters with which existing legislation has power to deal if only these powers are put into vigorous execution, all matters which go to the very root of a nation's strength and well-being. It is not humbug to talk about women having no share in the national life when, a small minority excepted, they have shown so little practical interest or sympathy in causes which concern the aged, the sick, the destitute, the erring, the welfare of little children. Local government does not lend itself to limelight and self-advertisement and fine phrases about democracy and liberty and natural rights. It means hard work, unsensational work, conscientious work, generally in a stuffy boardroom. Ventilation is more than imperial or local government can ever hope to achieve, but it is work on which the whole future of the race turns. One more word in conclusion. The suffragists tell you that the possession of the vote is the symbol of liberty. I ask you to consider that its absence is a symbol of something even greater, the symbol of disinterested service. Think of what it means to the deeper, more spiritual life of the state that it holds within its ranks bands of devoted workers who are giving their best for the love of the faith within them without one thought of profit or reward. The ugly scramble for place and power, for the loaves and fishes of preferment and offices, that is all part and parcel of these political rights of men some women are anxious to assume. Fighting and struggling for your own hand, we say that this is a bad game when played by men, and it would be an abominable game when played by women. Suffragists claim to stand for the spiritual forces of the future. I tell them that they have not yet learned the elementary spiritual truth that renunciation is eternally a greater thing than possession. In opposing the demand for the vote, we claim to stand for the true view of women's place in the state. One of the greatest Democrats the world has ever known, Joseph Mazzini, laid down the noble proposition that the sole origin of every right is in a duty fulfilled. And we hold that it is through the faithful fulfillment of duty, through service, not self-assertion, that woman will arrive at a true conception of her place in the body politic. End quote. Violet Markham, 28 February 1912. And I leave it to your judgment, ladies and gentlemen, to decide what you hear in Ms. Markham's words of 101 dozen years ago. Do you hear a poor, helpless, benighted Victorian woman who was too dumb to appreciate her own self-interest? Or do you hear a person who is fully cognizant of the fact that when we launch grand, sweeping, unprecedented social experiments, they will have consequences far beyond those that their proponents intend, and those consequences will not all be unambiguously positive, and they will redound through decades and centuries and generations in ways that not even the most astute observer can accurately prognosticate. And while you mull that over, I now convey you into the loving embrace of my distinguished colleague, your illustrious co-host, the one and only, your friend and mine, Mr. Caucasian Sasquatch.
Tactical nuke incoming!
Never forget what you are, for surely the world will not. Tyrion Lannister. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Blast Radius. Tonight, we're going to discuss the economics of dragons and everything House of the Dragon because I have done my homework. Now,
Yeah.
chastise me properly.
Sir Sasquatch of Caucasian land has finally done his homework, and I get to release my blue Dragon Balls after 6 weeks of blue Dragon Ball buildup. So what a happy occasion this is.
I got to know, how many blue Dragon Balls do you have? I don't know what you get for collecting all 7, but with the orange ones, it's a bitch.
I guess we could just as well be referring to the little balls they keep on the table in the small council room, which Queen Rhaenyra has now gotten rid of. She has dispensed them as a relic of a long gone regime, which is going to return in a few weeks. But little does she know that, and I guess the last laugh's going to be on her, because I bet they are going to bring those balls back. By God,
the balls must return. Free the balls
must return. I like the little balls. I don't know what the purpose of them is. I just know I like them.
Oh, it's like the hands. It's like the hands. Little thing that he wears. That is a public representation of the office. The little ball is a physical representation of the office, and I think it's a bit of dragon glass of different colors that have been polished down for each of the small council members.
Because I recall, and you might recall also, that in the season 1 episode in which King Viserys has finally died and the small council is meeting to plot their next moves, Sir Otto Hightower, Hand of the King, he does the first part. He does all of his conspiratorial speaking while he is holding his ball in his hand. And then when you're ready to go on the record, you put the ball in the little ball dish. And what difference does it make? I don't know. I just think it's kind of cool.
Due to Melisandre, we do know that there is at least a small amount of magic on this world. It is not an impossible concept that this might actually be some form of record keeping. I can't say it's not. We don't know how much magic the Maesters can do. I mean, one of them literally made a freaking zombie. So,
yes, and I like the fact that they have boldly and unambiguously introduced the fact in this season of this show that the Maesters fucking hate the Targaryens and they fucking hate dragons. They think they're evil black magic bullshit. They want them all dead. And it's kind of a nice nod to the fan conspiracy that has existed for a lot of years that the actual demise of all dragons had much to do with surreptitious activities by the Maesters, who of course come from Old Town, and where the Citadel and the Great Sept used to be located there before they built the Sept of Baelor. And of course that's the seat of the Hightowers. So Hightowers and the Faith and the Maesters all kind of on the same team as far as how they feel about the Targaryens and the dragons. Don't like the Targaryens, don't like the dragons, don't like brothers fucking sisters, none of that shit. And now we've seen the ultimate expression of that just in the last couple of episodes, where we see that, and I like this departure that they've made from the books, is that they're trying to set up Prince Daeron as a rival claimant to the throne. And I think that's a cool move, because I think we're only one Greyjoy away from a second War of the Five Kings at this point, and I am on board for it.
Right. All we need is a Baratheon and what else? Well, we got the Sea Snake. I guess we could sort of slot the Sea Snake in there.
Give me a Baratheon with a Warhammer, and we are there, baby.
Right? Oh my God! Or a Laughing Storm. Can we hope? Can we pray? I mean, that is probably the best character ever. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about the economics of dragons. And it's one of the things that is a subtext throughout this entire show. It's never mentioned, but it is depicted. They don't tell you, they show you, with the collapse of the food in King's Landing and the collapse of the trade routes pretty much all over the Seven Kingdoms. Right this moment in the timeline of the show, the only place that's eaten is the Vale. That is it. Everything has been picked dry everywhere else. And because the dragons are so freaking active everywhere, the sheep population and local farmer population has just been decimated. Like,
Oh yeah.
Imagine.
If you're a sheep fucker, it's a series of dark days for you.
Oh, she was a bonny lass.
And I think the first time it was ever alluded to, the practical realities of dragons consuming what they need to assume was Game of Thrones final season, when Daenerys took her whole crew up to the north to Winterfell, and Sansa was like, I wasn't planning on feeding all these Dothraki and all these Unsullied and all these other motherfuckers and 3 full-grown dragons, because what the fuck does a dragon eat exactly? And then, of course, Daenerys, in a classic power move, says, whatever they want.
Yeah, it is whatever they want. And that's kind of how this show is depicting it is, and I'm sure it's probably written in the laws somewhere, right? Sort of like how they're housing the troops in was it Small Town or Flea Bottom,
Dumbleton.
Dumbleton. Yeah, they just march 3 people into some random house that's already got 6 people in it, and you've got to cook and clean and do all the stuff for them. And there's no question.
And that is exactly why we have a Third Amendment.
Yep. And so, are you also just? Is what the dragon eats just part of the taxation? Like, how do you deal with that as rulership? What's the economics on that? Is my question.
Well, yeah, and Rhaenyra had to deal with that a little bit during the scene where she was hearing her first series of petitions after she had taken King's Landing and installed herself on the throne. Where first we saw the I think it must have been the Weavers who were saying, well, you brought half a dozen dragons in here. They're eating all the sheep. We have no wool now. And Rhaenyra says she thinks she's got the answer. She says, well, can't we just shave the damn sheep before the dragons consume them? And she thinks she's got it all figured out. But then one of the butchers comes up and says, nah, that doesn't work either, Your Grace, because we still need to get meat from somewhere. And then she thinks she's got the answer for that too. She says, well, what if I let you just do some hunting in the Kingswood? And then that completely horrifies Corlys Velaryon in the hand of the king. She says, your ancestors would be absolutely horrified that you were going to let small folk go hunt game in the Kingswood, because that's the absolute last thing you do in the Kingswood. The Kingswood is supposed to be reserved for the use of the king. That's where all the good animals are. That's where all the stags and all the big fat boars and all the stuff that kings like to hunt, to be available to hunt when they want to go on their hunt, like we saw in season 1 when Viserys went on his big hunt and struggled like a pussy to put a spear through the heart of a captive a captive stag, which was kind of embarrassing for him. But he was missing a couple fingers at the time, so I think you got to give the guy a break. But anyway, that suggestion completely horrifies him. But again, she thinks she's got a middle road, a workaround. She says, well, how about no big game, but how about just rabbits and squirrels? That'll fix it, right? Go in the Kingswood, hunt some rabbits and squirrels. Everybody will be happy, but I don't think everybody's going to be happy when they go to the butcher shop in King's Landing and they only have rabbit and squirrel meat to choose from. Well, maybe that's just me.
Went further down that rabbit hole, pun intended.
Well
she
played.
Invited literally every single great house in the city and around the city to a banquet. A banquet.
Oh, I know. Yep.
Has no food to serve at. All the big houses around are hoarding as much food as they can because they're expecting this to be a very rough year, and they've already stripped everything out of all the stalls. The small folk are eating rats. And
I did enjoy the rat banquet. That was fun.
He serves up a whole bunch of big old tasty wharf rats cooked by a 5-star chef with the full trimmings all around.
Oh yes,
like turnips and green beans, and that was it. And
there was no shortage of them in the castle. There was more than anybody needed because, of course, King Aegon hanged all the rat catchers after Prince Jacaerys got murdered, and they still haven't until the following episode figured out that maybe we should just bring in a shitload of cats to deal with the rat problem. Maybe they'll wind up having to eat the cats too. Who knows?
Well, that is all right. So there's an ascendancy of crop animals, right? And,
right.
And ironically, rats, cats, dogs, pigs, goats, most of them are not omnivores or carnivores. You don't generally farm a carnivore. That's not. You do that for leather. You do that for pet trading.
True.
You don't do that for food, right?
Yeah.
That being said, you can certainly feed some eating sized cats off of a bunch of feral rats, no problem. And you could probably feed some pretty fat dogs off some feral cats.
Oh yeah,
the world over, bro.
Especially if your castle's been under siege for 6, 7, 8 months. The animals you have on hand start looking progressively tastier. I think Stannis Baratheon told a story about that when Storm's End was under siege by the Lannisters during Robert's Rebellion, didn't he? Well, first we decided we'd just get over it and eat the horses, and then we decided we'd get over it and eat the dogs, and then we decided we'd get over it and eat the cats, and then we decided we'd get over it and eat the rats, and then there was no goddamn critters left to eat, and finally that was when Sir Davos Seaworth showed up with
onions.
His fortuitous boatload of onions and saltfish and saved the day. Right. And God bless Sir Davos.
God bless the onion knight.
Oh, God bless. Sorry.
Yeah,
got to get my nomenclature straight.
So okay, let's take all of it into account. Viserys, but yes, I think it was Viserys had what, 9 dragons? That were too young and a couple that were kind of old, but he had like 5 active dragons.
Viserys was the final rider of Balerion the Black Dread, but only rode him a few times, as I recall, and then never took another dragon. As far as how many dragons were active in the royal house during his reign, I would have to look that up. But Daemon has Caraxes. I will pull up the AI thinking machine.
What the fuck's going on machine? So let's try to figure this out. We were talking backstage beforehand. A dragon is probably going to eat, we'll say, an even 10 horses a day. Horse averaging around 1,000 pounds. You're talking 5 tons of meat, bone and hoof, hair and whatnot. That's at least 18, 20 sheep. It
is at least a dozen sheep per dragon per day. It has to be. And I think it's about a dozen sheep per meal. So if we're being truly realistic based on the contextual clues that we've had in the 2 series that have involved dragons, right, you're probably looking at a minimum of 20 sheep per dragon per day. And that has to start making a dent pretty goddamn quickly. And I have the answer. I have the answer from the AI machine. During the reign of King Viserys I Targaryen, House Targaryen reached the peak of its power with 20 dragons alive, so you were closer than I was. This total included both bonded mounts and wild or unbonded dragons living on Dragonstone. Key living dragons: Vhagar, Vermithor, and Silverwing. Those are older dragons. Active adult mounts are Caraxes, Meleys, Syrax, and Dreamfire. Younger claimed dragons: Sunfire, Seasmoke, Vermax, Arax, Taraxes, Moondancer, and Tessarion. And then you've got the wild and or unclaimed dragons, including Cannibal, Sheepstealer, and Grey Ghost. But Sheepstealer obviously has now been claimed by Rhaena because they have combined that character with Nettles from the books, and a lot of people were pissed off last year about Nettles being written out of the TV show, but they have kind of smashed those characters together. And I was kind of meaning to ask how you felt about the way they've executed that whole swap out, because I'm not displeased with it particularly. I think they've done it rather well. I think the biggest problem I have with it is the breaking of the internal in-world logic regarding dragon behavior, because George Martin has been very clear and unambiguous about the fact that dragons don't just take off and start roaming wildly. There's no way that an unclaimed dragon living on Dragonstone would just randomly go fly up to the Vale, but they had to have Sheepstealer randomly fly up to the Vale so they could have him in the same location where Rhaena was, so that she could claim him and then go and screw the pooch at the Battle of the Gullet and wind up getting Prince Jacaerys killed. And now she's living on the run in a cave in the Vale, and I think Rhaenyra is going to find out what went down in the episode that's premiering right now as we speak. I think it's all going to hit the fan.
one of the considerations in all of this, what I was getting at is if you have uh 6 dragons operating, and then there's what, another 4 or 5 out there that we don't really know what are doing. We just know there's a couple that hang around Dragonstone because that's where they used to live when they were pups. And then there's the Dark Dread, the Great Calamity. I can't remember that one's name.
Well, and
He's
out of the
one
list out of the list we just read out, some of them already are dead in the show. Like Meleys is dead. Sunfire is not dead. We're supposed to think Sunfire is dead, but I think he's about to come back to life
taking a nap.
based on he's just taking a nice long nappy nap.
Well,
And
I mean, do you see that fucking crash zone that he was in when they found him? He's half buried in the damn dirt. He came down like a meteor, bro. I mean,
yeah.
you might need to sleep that off for a little while.
Yep. Well, and the fact that he's not visibly decomposing, I think, lends credence to the theory that he's just in deep hibernation, which I think dragons are able to do, according to the logic of the universe, that they can be in deep hibernation and be dead by all external appearances. But if their rider comes back and tickles them under the chin just right and tries to get them to wake up, then they can potentially wake up. But he's going to wake up in a if they follow what was in the book, then he's going to wake up in a pretty debilitated condition, just the same way his rider is in a rather debilitated condition. He's had his dick burned off by dragon fire. That can't be a fun way to live. Half of his face burned off by dragon fire, and it's going to get worse because I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that during the battle over Dragonstone, which should be coming up before the end of this season, Aegon on Sunfire fights a battle against Bela on Moondancer, and they both get fucked up beyond all recognition, and Aegon winds up smashing both of his legs again after he's already smashed one of his legs. So yeah, that dude is going to be in a world of hurt coming up here pretty quick.
Yeah, it's not going to end well for. Actually, nobody gets out of any of this alive, and we already know this because we.
I know, and I'm wondering how they're going to handle that, because most of the characters that we know and are familiar with are supposed to become dead in the next
real soon.
Yeah, a couple few.
Real soon.
I mean, by the end of the show, the only people who are going to remain alive that we know and are familiar with are, again, if they hew closely to the source material, are like Queen Alicent, Corlys Velaryon, little King Aegon, and Cregan Stark.
Hold on,
because
I'm fixing to sidetrack to a totally different topic because you brought up Alicent. She is the most manipulative, maniacal individual in the whole show. That woman has more Tyrion in her than you could possibly imagine. The more I find out about her, the more I love that chick to the deepest throes of my heart, bro. She is an absolute unit and the singular most influential character so far in the series.
Yeah, and I understand that in a TV show you have to have main characters, and you obviously are adapting something that's not even a novel per se. It's a fictional in-universe history book, so it's not something that you can adapt directly, but you have to have main characters. You have to have identifiable actors that the viewer can follow from episode to episode to episode. And I understand that they decided early on that the relationship between Alicent and Rhaenyra was going to be basically the centerpiece of the whole narrative of the show. And they took a couple of liberties to get it that way. They aged Alicent down by about 10 years so that they could be the same age. They made them be childhood besties, which wasn't really present in the source material. And I understand also that you want your two main characters and lead actresses to play scenes opposite one another. However, I thought in the last season they took it really too far and got kind of ham-fisted with midnight passages between Dragonstone and King's Landing. First for Rhaenyra to go into the Sept and meet with Alicent, and then for Alicent to go from King's Landing to Dragonstone and meet with Rhaenyra.
All of it, break the entire series for everybody. Your suspension of disbelief will be completely thrown out of the water by asking a single question.
Exactly.
How long does it take to get on a cart and go from King's Landing to Hightower? And then how long does it take for a dragon to fly from King's Landing to Dragonstone?
As I understand it, King's Landing to Dragonstone and vice versa is a day's voyage by sea and about half a day by dragon. And obviously there was no dragon travel involved here. It was all very, very surreptitious, very, very get me on a boat with my one Kingsguard knight, and it just would never happen, dude. And then the dressing up as a nun, and it's just
not logically possible when it comes down.
It's not logically possible. It breaks the whole internal logic of the universe, and it's too far of a bridge to cross just because you want to invent an excuse for your two lead actresses to play a scene together, in my opinion.
Right. Okay, so next step. How long does it take a 95-pound waif to starve to death? So let me, for those of you who have not seen it, let me lay out lay it out for you. Sheep Stealer, one of the most terrifying dragons in all of Westeros. He is known north and in Bravos because occasionally he'll even show up there and go jack an entire flock of sheep and then just fuck off back to the south somewhere. Most often seen on Dragonstone.
Wild dragon, old dragon, never claimed by anybody.
Never accepted a rider, and basically is still at Dragonstone because that's where he was at when he refused riders and just fucked off. And now Dragonstone's largely abandoned, which, I mean, currently it's occupied, but typically it's just a castle over there, you know. Whenever there's war, somebody goes and occupies it when needed. Otherwise, it's just the rock by the sea. That being said, what's up, Mike? Welcome in. That being said, that dragon single-handed, and there's two that fuck off over there on Dragonstone, but that dragon single-handedly is the reason why there is zero occupation of that entire island and the little archipelago attached to it, right? Mm-hmm. Between him and, was it the Grey Ghost?
And the Cannibal.
And the Cannibal. Are all three are occupied Dragonstone?
Yep.
Three of them? Jesus, no wonder. All right. So you've got three legendarily sized dragons that all occupy the same geographic area, largely because they just weren't claimed or have lost their rider, and they're from Dragonstone, from a time when Dragonstone was occupied, right?
Yeah, some people believe that those dragons actually lived on Dragonstone before the Targaryens ever lived there, when they fled from Valyria before the Doom. So all three of them are very, very old, in other words, and not known to have ever accepted a rider.
We're fixing to go into some deep nerdy lore, some stuff that I vaguely remember. Before the fall of Valyria, there were three massive organized attempts to discover more of the known world. Valyrians had outposts kind of like our Atlantis all over the world. They were a world power in a world that has magic and dragons and all of that stuff. And the best analogy I can make is the kingdom of Melniboné from Michael Moorcock. It's so similar, I cannot believe that it was not some sort of influence, especially the appearance of the Targaryens being very pale with the like bleach white hair.
Yep.
So I don't know, dude. The whole thing just smacks of sort of a Mobius type thing devouring its own tail. You can't live on Dragonstone. You can't live on certain parts of Hightower because it's close enough that the hunting ground overlaps. And there's a lot of places in Bravos with stories of dragons. They're rare, exceedingly rare, but the thing is, there are men alive who remember being attacked by a dragon, but there were no riders of those dragons. These
And
were
then
the wild ones.
and those are some of the things that I really appreciate about the world building in this universe, because it so directly mirrors the level of knowledge that Europeans would have had in the 11th or 12th or 13th century. And Valyria is basically the Greco-Roman civilizations. They've long since fallen, and we know a little bit about them, but we don't. Many of the records have been lost, and we don't we and so when records are lost, then you fill in the gaps with legend and supposition and fantastic fictional beasts sometimes. And but
Wrong.
the only difference here is that dragons are actually real. But again, when we first enter the Game of Thrones universe in the original show, dragons don't exist anymore. Dragons are beasts that once existed, and that's exactly what medieval Europeans, most of them, actually believed. It never occurred to them that dragons were actually fictional mythical creatures. They believed that dragons were beings that used to exist but had gone extinct for reasons unknown. And each time somebody discovered some gigantic ass dinosaur bone and didn't have any way of explaining it, it was explained as, well, it must be the remnant of some ancient dragon. Therefore, dragons are real. Yep.
One of my favorite analogy or suggestions when it comes to that type of stuff is there was a Greek paleontologist who had went through college as a myth, was it culture studies or something like that? She was a myths, legends, stuff like that, specifically Slavic type and Greek type myths, European and whatnot. Anyway, she had come up with a theory, and it was all derived from a vacation she took where she went and did some paleontology with some, random volunteer team that were, doing a known site, getting known fossils out of solid rock. And she came across one, and the two guys that were uncovering it were like, it's really weird how it kind of looks like a griffin when you back up and look at it, because the way the crest broke off and laid on the back after the decomposition had taken place, you could easily mistake them for wing bones if you didn't know what you were looking at, and so these big, not stegosaurs, but the crested dinosaurs, the triceratops types, they have beaked mouths, and you could be forgiven if you just saw it on profile for thinking that might not be an eagle, especially if you didn't take the horns into account. And then you add the horns, and what the fuck is this thing, dude? It's obviously fearsome.
Well, and also, let's say you find a fossilized pterodactyl, which could very easily be mistaken with the level of knowledge that existed in medieval times for perhaps a juvenile dragon of the physiological type that we see in the Song of Ice and Fire universe, where it's not 4 legs and 2 wings, but rather it's 2 legs and two bat-like forelimbs that provide flight and locomotion, and also function as front legs when the beast is on the ground. If you didn't know any better, if you had no means or method of knowing better, you could very easily, and through no fault of your own, default to legendary species to explain the very weird ass skeleton of that flying creature that you just found. You've got no reason to believe this thing is millions of years old. That would never occur to you, because people didn't know the world was millions of years old at that time. And what's really fascinating is that so many disparate civilizations, for such a series of totally disconnected reasons, independently developed their own mythologies about giant fire-breathing flying reptilian creatures. And
in the sky.
Yeah. And anthropologists have spent decades and decades and centuries trying to figure out why exactly that is, and they're really no closer to an answer because there is no common factor that explains it. You've got it can't be exclusively from the fossil record because the Norwegians and the Swedes and the Finns have dragon legends, and that part of that part of Scandinavia is completely bereft of dinosaur fossils from what we know compared to most of the rest of the world. And East Asia, different dragon legends. West Asia, different dragon legends. Polynesians, dragon legend. Yeah, all over the goddamn place.
They're different dragons too. They're not ubiquitously the same. There are certain features that they seem to share, like the Native American legends tend towards the Thunderbird types, but farther south you get, the more large flying reptile in the sky they become, right?
Yes.
I'm not aware of a good dragon analogy except for a handful of the supposed sea monsters and lake monsters associated with like the Algonquin and the Iroquois. But outside of that, I'm unaware of dragon legends.
And then that also goes back and ties in, I think, with another way in which the Song of Ice and Fire universe mirrors the European real world in the High Middle Ages, is that we know the world is round and we've mapped a certain portion of it, but we don't know how much of a portion of the whole, the portion that we've mapped, actually is. It could be most of it. It could be just a small part. And when we get to the edges of the map, to the edges of the known world, that is where myth and legend take over. Because as we know, the maps and charts that used to exist in the 12th, 13th, 14th centuries, you would get to the edge of it, to where the edge of where we reliably know what's here, and then it would say, what would it say beyond that? It would say, here be dragons. Right?
Terra incognita, the unknown world. They accepted the unknown existed.
And they would actually draw monsters on the maps. This is as far as our knowledge goes. So beyond here must be amazing, fantastical beasts that only exist in legend. And of course, they didn't know that back then. They were taking a rather the best educated guess they could take. That they were saying, well, why would these legends exist if these creatures don't actually exist? So these creatures must actually exist beyond the edges of the known world, and the known world,
tinfoil hat stuff.
Yeah, and go ahead.
The known world. Finish your thought. I'm sorry, I got caught.
I'm done. You take it.
Okay. So one of the things that's always intrigued me isn't so much the old maps that we have. The old maps that we have are largely either misunderstood by modern or misrepresented by modern Mercator maps, right? They didn't utilize Mercator lines the same way we do. They didn't utilize the North Pole as north. They centered things around whatever their home port was, and all of this can have really weird effects on a map, depending on, the cartographer involved. And it turns out that a lot of these old map makers would go places and find older maps and just copy stuff off of them, right?
Yep.
And so the existence of Australia had largely been not only theorized, but actually known. Like, it was put on most maps. It just wasn't called Australia. It was called the Southern Continent.
It was called Terra Incognita Australis, unknown southern land.
Right, which they never seem to quite hammer out as being actually two locations, but only one. Right. They assumed that Australia and the Antarctica were pretty much one landmass, when in reality, of course, they're not. But were they perhaps at the time?
And it's not until all the way in the goddamn 1830s that we settle that question definitively, when Bellinghausen circumnavigates between Australia and Antarctica. I believe it was Bellinghausen, wasn't it?
Point out, we had already abandoned thousands of people on that fucking rock before we knew it wasn't.
Oh God, I know. Yeah.
Thousands.
A lot of sons of bitches had to die in order for us to gain the cartographical knowledge that we wound up gaining.
That is so true, dude.
Men used to be a hardier breed than they are today. That is for goddamn sure.
And so to bring it back to the dragons of Westeros and the analogies we were just making was the Valerians were largely the only people anywhere in ancient I don't even know what the name of the planet is. In ancient
Planetos.
Planetos, an ancient Planetos that utilized dragons, right? There was a bunch of weird magical genetic altering that went on to make that happen. There's some theories from the Maesters that the dragons were bred through dark magics to create the fire worms and the various other things.
And there's a belief among some maesters that it was a crossbreeding of wyverns with fireworms combined with a little bit of black magic, mix it all up in a cocktail, and then boom, you got dragons.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's the other step from having dragons over to being able to actually commune with them, which involved dragons and some Targaryens and whip them up with some black magic. And boom,
yeah. And then I think that's probably where blood magic comes into the equation.
My theory always ran like this. We have 3 known kingdoms that existed as co-kingdoms with Valyria, right? You have the dark city of Asshai. You have the weird ice city over there, and I can't remember the name of it, where nobody ever goes because it's too far. And you have the Eastern Isles or whatever.
You've got Yi, which is supposed to be Imperial China, and then you've got the Shadow.
That's so far away, nobody can go there. Got a shot.
Yeah,
Shadow.
Yeah,
and then there's the Eastern Islands that are basically more or less mythical. Japan, maybe, I don't know. We really get nothing from George Martin about what is actually there, but occasionally you come across a slave from over there, and they're all unbelievably well educated. Every single one of them can read and write multiple languages. They're all absolutely top notch. They don't speak with accents. They are flawless in their diction. They're renowned the world over for being, excellent translators, linguists, mathematicians, accountants, you freaking name it. And so they are highly sought after and almost never seen.
But there's never been a Westerosi Marco Polo yet that we know of. So somebody who visited the Far East and came back with detailed accounts of it. I guess Corlys Velaryon is kind of close because he's done his 9 voyages and been about as far as anybody else has been.
Well, no, there was that chick back in the day.
Alyssa Farman.
Right. She got lost out there amongst some islands where she apparently went to a point. What was it? Dragon Reach is supposedly the farthest a dragon can fly over open water before they have to land. They found an island out there and called it Dragon Reach. And it's part of an archipelago, less like the Caribbean and more like Hawaii, where there's
that's right. They found 3 islands and named them Aegon, Visenya, and Rhaenys.
Yeah. Right. Yep. When she comes back, she dubbed it the southern island Dragon Reach. It was the farthest a dragon can fly before they ran out of steam and died. But she came back. They get named that, and then she loads up a new sortie and flies out to Dragon Reach, and then flies west from Dragon Reach and never comes back. So we don't have a Marco Polo because she didn't finish her circumnavigation. The assumption is, and by the way, there are half a dozen sorties of ships that have sailed off the edge of the map in that direction too. Nobody comes back from the west beyond Dragon Reach.
Yeah, and we still don't know definitively whether there is an intervening continent when you sail into the Sunset Sea between Westeros and the eastern part of Essos, which again is exactly what Europeans didn't know in the 1200s and 1300s. They kind of thought that if you sailed west and sailed long enough and stayed alive long enough that eventually you would run into China and India, and then what happens? We discover the Americas. How about that? Look at all this land there is here. This planet's bigger than we thought it was.
There are very few, but a couple of references about something being east of that location. One in the Salt Isles over there in the Iron Islands, they occasionally have land animals wash up from the west. And most of these animals, they don't recognize what they are exactly. They seem to be some form of deer or some form of hippo or some form of something that they're fairly familiar with, but these aren't it. Right? So there is something over there. Also, when Home Chick flew out to Dragon Reach, she commented on the fact that there were shorebirds flying west from that island. And if she was talking albatrosses, that wouldn't help a whole lot. But on the other hand, if we're talking, freaking sandpipers, which, I mean, hell, they can fly like 700 miles or something like that. But still, there's something over there. The implication is solid.
So should we talk about the playing fast and loose with dragon growth rates? Because I think we need to talk about that, because it's a pretty big sore thumb in the universe, I think, but nobody ever discusses it all that much. And what else are we here for than to discuss things that other people don't wish to discuss? However, I think there is a lot of inconsistency in this universe, the way it's been presented in the two TV shows that have featured dragons. First Game of Thrones, now House of the Dragon. We don't have really any consistency with the rate at which dragons grow after they hatch. And what did we see in Game of Thrones? We saw 3 dragons hatch out of their eggs in the final episode of the first season, and by the 7th and 8th seasons, they are full ass grown. They are the same size freaking Vagar is today. And how much calendar time has elapsed during those 7-8 seasons of television? It's only a few years, really. And that is wild. At most, yeah. And that is wildly contradictory with what we see in House of the Dragon, where a dragon hatches and it's a hatchling for a year, 2. It doesn't get big enough to fly until the rider is a teenager. Just let's take Daeron Targaryen and his dragon Tessarion for one example. That was his dragon egg that was placed in his cradle. It hatched when he was still an infant, and it's only just now, when he's 15, 16 years old, as it's been stated in the show, that it has just now become big enough to start riding and going to battle. And compared to all of the other dragons in the show, it's really quite tiny. It's about the same size that Vermax was, Jacaerys's dragon that got killed along with his rider, the Battle of the Gullet, earlier on in this season. But
that's another one of the dead dragons they find when they're wandering around out there. I think, was it Aegon? No, the freaking timey-wimey guy. What's his character?
Which guy?
Doctor Who. That guy.
Oh, okay. Doctor Who.
I don't remember the character's name. There's Aegon, Aemond,
Daemon. Yeah, there's a lot of.
It's just, dude, it gets me so mixed up. I know him by face. I can recognize him, but not the guy who lost the eye, but the other dude, the one that's an absolute unit. And by the way, I want to throw accolades on that man. I do not, before this, I could not have imagined him playing a bloodthirsty dominator the way he does. I mean, that battle when he goes and gets the crab, or what was his name?
Oh, yeah. Matt Smith, Kragus Drahar.
Dude, that's savagery. Absolute savagery.
And that's one of the things I wanted to talk about here tonight, is that's a character that everybody likes and is attached to. It's an actor that everybody likes, and a lot of people probably tune into the show just to see Matt Smith playing Daemon Targaryen. However, if we hew to the timeline that exists in the source material, he needs to die pretty quickly and probably not be around for the vast majority of the final season. And that leaves the showrunners with a hell of a conundrum, I think, because he's your lead actor. He's the most famous guy on the show. And yes, I know there is precedent for killing off your lead actor at the end of the first season. They obviously did it with Ned Stark first season, Game of Thrones. But how far realistically can you push back the battle over the God's Eye in the timeline, and in order just to keep Matt Smith and his character Daemon Targaryen around? Because remember also that Aemond Targaryen also has to die in that battle, because they both go down and get killed battling each other, and both of their dragons go down and get killed, and all goddamn 4 of them sink into the bottom of the God's Eye. But 2 of your lead actors, 2 of your lead dragons, I can't imagine they are eager to kill off any of those characters. And I just wonder how much they are willing to play fast and loose with the timeline in order to keep them around as long as possible. Because realistically, they probably should die in tonight's episode. But I think tonight's episode is the Butcher's Ball, so they probably next week's episode at the absolute latest. If you're going to hew to the timeline, go ahead.
That specific battle where I think 5 dragons die and 4 of the dragon riders, one of those dudes survives, but he is fucked up afterwards. I'm not sure any of them actually die in the battle. I think they all die from like festering wounds or burns and shit, like, because it's fucked up. But there's a name for that battle that's not usually used amongst Targaryens. It's like the Night of Tears or something like that. The day that the night the sky rained blood.
Well, in the
references
in the battle over the God's Eye, Aemond and Daemon and Caraxes and Vhagar all get directly killed. No wounds or nothing. They all die directly, sink to the bottom, and then they have to also do the Battle of Tumbleton, in which the 2 of the dragon seeds, Hugh and Ulf, Turncloak, switch sides and go from Rhaenyra's side to the green side. And
right,
both of those things have to be dealt with in the next, how many episodes? We've only got 2 episodes left this season after tonight. I guess 3 episodes technically as far as what we've seen. And I wonder how they're going to fit all this shit in. I really do, especially since the seasons have been truncated from 10 episodes to 8. I don't know how they're going to pull it off.
Bro, the first episode, when they come in, what is he taking? Harrenhal?
Yeah.
I'm not sure it was Harrenhal. That whole sequence of them, him just burning his way in. Oh my God, dude. That's what I've been waiting on, for a show using dragons to actually use the freaking dragons, dude. Because logistically speaking, yes, a dragon gives you aerial superiority. Yes, the dragon gives you an almost unlimited amount of firepower. At the same time, it's a very heavy cost unit, right? Like, one of your greatest fighters is trained up to be able to go out and single-handedly stand on a freaking battlement with his dragon and take the fucker. And you got 6 of those guys flying around. But are they worth 10,000 units? 20? I mean, what? Without the 20,000 units, you lose the castle anyway, right?
Right.
So without the boots on the ground, the dragons are virtually useless. They're only there for reprisal.
Yeah, and that's a very real issue that exists in real world combat, even here in the 21st century. There is a limit to how much you can do solely with an air force without putting infantry boots on the ground.
Right.
It's a question that we're dealing with right now today.
Yep.
Over in a certain part of the world.
So what I'm getting at is this. Aemon shows up, he completely just decimates Harrenhal and gets gigged by some asshole in the back, and then gets kept by some witch that just happens to hang out in the walls or something. I don't know what's up with that chick, dude. Like, she creeps shit out of me.
My biggest complaint about the show in general, yeah, I guess 2 2/3 of seasons into the thing is Harrenhal itself, and specifically Harrenhal being used as a placeholder just to give a character a place to go and do nothing because we have nothing else for him to do. They did it last year for basically half the season with Damon, where he just went to Harrenhal and had a bunch of trippy fucking dreams and hung out with Alice Rivers and talked to the Godswood tree and saw a green man and did all that shit. It didn't really do anything to advance the narrative, but so much time was spent there. And the only things of consequence that ever happened there, of course, was when Oscar Tully demanded that he take Willem Blackwood's head so that he could have the army of the Rivermen come over to Rhaenyra's side. And this year they're doing the same thing, but they're just doing it with Aemond instead of Daemon. They didn't have anything for him to do, so they just had him go there and get stabbed and convalesce. And same shit, just bunch of trippy dreams and kill some invaders and what have you. And the choice to have Vhagar take off and disappear is a strange thing, and I don't really understand what they're seeking to achieve with it. Maybe we'll get some kind of answer in tonight's episode, but I'm not sure, because in the book, Criston Cole and his army and Aemond and Vhagar are never separated. They march through the Reach
and they rain so much shit down on everybody that's against the Queen at that point. Like, they are an absolute freaking terror. They operate with zero engagement tactics, zero engagement doctrine. They just kill everything they encounter in those woods that aren't under their own banners. And it's a very different story.
It is, and I guess they wanted to do it that way so that Criston would have this sort of asymmetrical guerrilla warfare thing that he's been doing for the last couple weeks, where
what a weird choice.
It is a weird choice. We're outnumbered 20-1, and we're just gonna do rear guard actions and sabotage and little raids and what have you. And
historically speaking, a guerrilla war tactics like that are superior to in full invasion status, right? It'll only work for a certain amount of time, and it only works to a certain point, but it can really, really throw the sand in the gears of a war machine on the way forward. The problem is the characters chosen for this, the characters that are doing this in relation to who they were first, second season, it's a very different thing here. Like, you took the golden boy, the silver defendant of the Queen herself, and turned him into Rambo.
Yeah. And they took Gawain Hightower, who in the book, he's in King's Landing this whole time and winds up getting killed already before now. They took him and stuck him with Criston and his army, he almost functions as kind of a viewer insert character. The guy who looks around and says, these people are all fucking mad. I want to get the hell out of here. These people are goddamn crazy. I don't want any part of this nihilistic suicide mission, which of course he finally reached his limit in last week's episode and decided that he was going to GTFO and go to Tumbleton and meet up with his cousin Ormond and try to find someone less depressing to hang out with than Criston Cole, who's just on a death wish mission. Really, he just wants people to sing songs about him. He doesn't care when he dies, how he dies. I just want people to sing songs about me, and maybe Queen Alicent will hear one of them, and maybe her coochie will get wet, and that's all I want out of my death.
I want to do a little housekeeping here, and I do not understand why this is the case, but Ahimsa, for whatever reason, you're not showing up in StreamYard at all. I just now noticed that you're in chat. So welcome in. Appreciate you being here. Much love. Don't let the man get you down and all of that. And try not to get bit by a dragon.
Words to live by.
One of the issues. All right, so the scene where the guys keep showing up at Harrenhal saying, I know Aemond's here, I know Aemond's here, I know Aemond's here. She's always like freaking them out. All right. The specific scene I'm talking about is when the second or third group shows up and she meets them out on the courtyard. People who haven't read the books wouldn't understand how fucking awesome that scene really is. Harrenhal stood against dragon invasion for 1,000 years until some asshole, and I can't remember which one, I think it was one of the Rhaegars, just he basically white flagged his way in and then killed everybody from the inside and then had his dragon dig his way into Harrenhal so that this would never be a problem again. Now, when she meets those 3 guys or 4 guys or what it was, and they're talking about where's Aemon, and she does the weird, creepy, I'm a witch thing, and then tosses the fucking thing over her shoulder, the rock, what she's doing is tossing a rock into that hole that's maybe 200 feet deep that got dug into the bottom of that castle so that nobody could ever use it as a readout against dragons again. And it is renowned the world over to be so full of bats that nobody can stand to go in there. The lower reaches are completely full of guano. This place should have been mothballed a long time ago, and yet they still occupy it in and out of wars, which is really cool.
And then later on, when the next band of dickhead gormless bounty hunter assholes show up, we get what, the 5th attempted sexual assault of the season. It's getting kind of weird the way they keep shoving these attempted sexual assaults into
the attempts are weird, like
practically every episode. Go ahead.
Is how much it fails, because you're not talking about soft men here. These guys don't ask, you know, and the idea that offending somebody in the room might stop that dude from doing something, that's kind of weird. Now, the high tower one, I understand. Somebody trying to get down on Alicent better be watching their fucking gonads, because she's going to end up with them bitches pegged to the end of her fucking door, dude. Like,
yeah,
no.
And we get that one, and then we get the one in Tumbleton with Hugh's wife and the soldiers who are being billeted in the house, and then we get the one with Alice in Harrenhal.
Oh,
and
no.
I have
you missed the first one. The very first one in the very first episode. One of the princes is walking through, and a chick runs screaming from some soldier's tent.
Oh yeah, when Gwaine sees it, and he goes and tells Kristen, and Kristen doesn't give a fuck. He's like, "I'm painting my shield, dude. Go hang the motherfucker if you want. Don't bother me with this shit." And he said, "I'm not his commander, asshole. I don't really have the authority to hang him. I'm just kind of here as an observer, you know. How about put away your labia and relocate your testicles and go deal with this shit and stop painting circles on your fucking shield."
Right. You got me, bro.
Instead, it's just, fuck, hang him if you want.
What I was working towards was Aemon coming out. He's injured, but I want to point out, and it's something that you get to see a little bit of it when he invades the place, but it's more well demonstrated in this fight. He cuts down like 10 people when he comes in, like just single-handedly as an absolute unit. You know, this is one of the top 5 swordsmen on the planet. Him, Daemon, and hell, probably 2 more would be either Targaryens or their relations, because those are the people that have the money to do the training. And then you've got that asshole that's in the King's Guard that's Alicent's maid man, right? He's an absolute freaking unit too. And do you know why he's a unit?
Why is he a unit?
He didn't serve at court in the way that most of these people did. He was basically like some poor fisherman's or whatever's fucking son who was friends with one of the highborn noble sons. And because the son wouldn't practice without having a buddy to practice with, he got to go practice with the first sword of fucking Bravos, who was vacationing over in like freaking Highgarden or Hightower or wherever the fuck he's from, right? And this is how he ended up becoming one of the greatest swords in reference in this time period. He is an absolute unit, and that whole Rambo thing that they're doing is just really weird to me for Knights.
It is. They're even like doing fake camouflage on their faces and everything. But since we're on the subject of swordsmen and swordsmanship, you know what I really hated about this. One of the things I really hated about this season, and granted, it's a short list, but this might have been the thing I hated the most. It's when 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago now, I guess, when Daemon and Rhaenyra fly into the undefended King's Landing and successfully take the castle. They go in there, just the two of them, and we fall back to the stupidest, shittiest action movie trope where Daemon's just waltzing through the courtyard, and all the defenders are waiting their turn, coming at him one by one. So like they're behind a turnstile, and I'm gonna cut you down, and now this guy's gonna run screaming at me, and I'm gonna cut him down. What an excellent reference that is. Somebody's got to go back and get a whole shitload of dimes. That is exactly right, my friend. You just hit that one out of the park.
But yeah, no. But here's the thing. It's one complaint I do have with this. It's very well done, but you get the problem you get when you're not casting action people in action roles, and you have someone who is clearly highly choreographed in doing this. You get that weird stop motion effect where obviously they're working to get the shot, and so you see them go to here, 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 dead. And there's that split second pause before he turns and engages the next. There's no pause. The one of the guys got shot in his back while he was doing exactly that bullshit in the first episode, and I thought we weren't going to have to deal with it because he did that pause and a fucking arrow appeared in his chest.
The thing that made it so confusing for me is that they actually made an effort to deal with the issue in the final scene on Dragonstone, where they're deciding that King's Landing is undefended. Aemond and Vhagar are gone. We're going to swoop in and take the city. Rhaenyra actually says, well, we need to make sure that we've got enough men going in there by boat in order to secure the city. But when it comes down to the actual event, it's just half a dozen people and half a dozen dragons. And we don't see really any troops except for the Gold Cloaks, the City Watch, who switch sides and fight on behalf of Daemon. But when they actually take the castle with just the two of them, and then they get into the throne room, and the King's Guard are there. They all just stand in a line, not attacking anyone, waiting a good long 2 or 3 minutes before the Gold Cloaks all show up, and they wouldn't you just stab the shit out of him and her both? Well, there's 20 of you and 2 of them.
Jamie Lannister.
Come on, man.
Jamie Lannister would have cleared that shit right up, bro. It wouldn't have even been a thought process. He'd been like, I stabbed.
Yeah, there was a series of problems I had with that whole sequence. Come on. Those guys aren't all just going to stand there. And earlier on, they aren't all going to wait their turn and attack one by one, because you're absolutely right. That's some Blazing Saddles shit. Somebody's got to go back and get a whole shitload of dimes.
Mr. 13, listen, it's a good show. It's solid. I actually was a hater in the first season. I fruited up the first time I saw the dragons because they weren't very well represented size-wise. Their movements were a little uncanny valley, but they seem to have worked a large part of that out. Not by fixing the uncanny valley effect, but by sticking with that uncanny tendency to be a little bit off, because no one really knows how dragons would fly. It's okay that they look a little weird when they do it, right? And we don't have a reference.
To answer the question, I would say it's probably worthwhile to listen to the audiobooks of Fire and Blood. You don't necessarily have to do it before you watch the show or after you watch the show, but it's a worthwhile thing to do just as a matter of perspective, so you can see when they're hewing to the source material and when they're going away from the source material. I think it's just a good perspective to have in general. And there are plenty of versions of it on YouTube that you can find. And that would be my answer to that.
When Game of Thrones first started up, my wife's father was already a huge Martin fan. And I happened to be coming through, and he asked me, he's like, hey, are you going to watch this show? And I was like, I don't know. I don't really have HBO. And the dude paid for HBO and then sent me a full collection of almost everything except for the stuff that was printed after, the Song of Ice and Fire extended bit. It wasn't none of the Duncan Egg stuff. It wasn't none of that stuff, but it was the basic books. And I read the first one and then I found them on audiobook and just got those. I think I might have read every word or listened to every word he's put to paper at this point. I'm not certain, but it's at least most of it.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same spot, and I have a hard time. I know some people are able to listen to audiobooks and retain it just as well as they do reading words on a page. I just can never get to that place. I never retain a thing as well listening to it as an audiobook as I do reading it in a traditional book, words on paper. Sure. I don't know how anybody else is with that, but I wish I could get to that place. I've tried. I just can't do it. I retain some stuff, but I retain it imperfectly. Like I've probably listened to the audiobooks of Fire and Blood 2 or 3 times, and I still don't feel like I've retained all the information as well as I would have done if I had actually read a physical book.
Here's a weird thing with me, and this is absurd. I can remember things that I've listened to, and you can say I'm crazy all you want, but I can remember things that I listened to while I was asleep. If I hear a reference later when I'm awake, I might not have a crisp memory of it, but I'll remember, wait, hold on. There was a dragon. He stayed near that place. He did what was it? He was like Raging High Garden or some shit for 2 or 3 years. And then he just fucked off Dragonstone. I don't remember what book that was in exactly, but that High Garden finally got to face the dragons for real. And it wasn't anybody riding the goddamn thing. It was just a random wild dragon that showed up and just completely raised High Garden to the goddamn ground just about for being a bit. They shot at him. They shot at him while he was flying by.
Do your dreams correspond with the thing you're listening to sometimes?
Sometimes it's like I'm not even asleep. It's very strange when that happens because I'll in my dream, I'm doing something that I'm doing all the time, which would be sitting here at the desk or watching TV or sitting in the living room, driving a car or whatever. And I'm riding along listening to an audiobook, and the audiobook's part of the dream, which I think is the only reason why I can carry the memories back into the waking state. I don't know if anybody else can do that.
For me, some of the coolest dreams I've ever had are when I went to sleep listening to the raw mission audio of the Apollo lunar missions.
All right, so we only got a couple of minutes, and I want to tell you this. I think you'll really appreciate it.
Go ahead.
All right. When Lord of the Rings first came out, I went to the theater to go watch it. And in the first 30 seconds of that movie, before that elven bitch stopped fucking whispering in my ear, I fell asleep, slept through the whole damn thing. 2 weeks later, I have a chance to go see it again. Yet again, it was a really long work day. I'd put in like 19 hours in 2 days, and it was I was exhausted. I went in, and that fucking elven bitch started talking, and my ass was out like a light. They woke me up about halfway through. So it comes out on DVD. I buy the DVD because I've never seen this fucking movie. I take it home, put it in, turn it on, and my ass is out before that damn elven bitch stops casting that sleep spell.
It's Pavlov's DVD.
That DVD was stolen. But a buddy of mine had a tape that he had actually made from the DVD, and it included so stupid. It included that whole movie and like from the middle to the end of Reservoir Dogs at the end of it. And I had some of the wildest fucking dreams, bro, because I would actually, if I had trouble sleeping, I would put in Lord of the Rings and I would be out before they actually left the fucking shower.
Nice.
It's about time you do that thing.
It's about time. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks ever so much for joining us here on the Blast Radius tonight. I hope you enjoyed the Dragon Time discussion. I know I sure did. I've managed to purge myself of my blue dragon balls that have been building up for 6 weeks or so. It got to be kind of painful, but I feel much better now. No blast radius next weekend. I'm planning on being at the hospital probably all day since that's the day that granddaughter Curmudgeon enters the world. So I'm marking that day off for family stuff. So unless my co-host wants to fly solo, there's going to be a one week blast radius hiatus. Thanks again for joining us. Hope you have a great tomorrow. Fabulous day after that. Edifying rest of your week and all that stuff. We will see you next time. Get off my lawn.
This one's for you, buddy. Nice.